Oh my goodness. I haven't seen you in a while.
Okay, we're all set.
All right, thank you. I'm going to call the monthly meeting of the Personnel Board to order. And if we would say the Pledge of Allegiance to start the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. I don't see that there are any minutes to approve on the agenda, so we're going to go to new business. And on the first item on the agenda is Scott Zakowski talking about recommending George Petrino, for a 3% merit raise. So would you like to speak to that, Scott?
Yes. Well, I'm going to pull that down for a minute. Yes, this past January, we did during our February meeting, rather, we did a formal review, annual review, first for our superintendent. And at that point, we voted to give him the COLA. Actually, we found out that there was a COLA that we just weren't aware of. So we voted to give him that. But after doing some research, checking the personnel manual, because it was the wish of the sewer commissioner, water and sewer commissioners to give our superintendent a pay increase. So I checked with the personnel manual. The manual told me that, and I'm following that procedure now. It was voted at our last meeting on Wednesday night, last Wednesday night, that we give him a 3% merit increase.
And so
that's been presented.
the step,
according to, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
According to the personnel manual, we make the recommendation. It goes to the personnel board, and then it goes from the personnel board to the board of selectmen.
Correct. That's the procedure. So what guidelines did you use to determine that merit increase? Was it because of exceptional that he took on, like, exceptional responsibility?
Oh, yes. For his performance appraisal, he was rated, I don't have it right in front of me, but he was rated well, the top is outstanding. The second level down, between the second level, right at the bridge between second level down and between 4 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's in this first year on the job. He has done exceptional work in moving towards modernizing our system, dealing with some rather daunting and heavy state mandates. I'm sure you've seen all the hullabaloo about PFAS and the water.
Mm-hmm.
He has gone very gone over and above as we see it in getting things done, moving things forward, moving projects forward, and then keeping our department running through one mass quarantine of the department. At one point, I think he was the only employee working, and then just keeping things going through through the COVID issues. He as we see it, he has done way more than could be expected for a first-year superintendent.
Okay, thank you. Mary Beth,
I also suggested to the water and sewer commissioners that this was really the only vehicle to correct what was an error last fiscal year where the superintendent didn't get his cost of living adjustment. So I have no opposition to a 3% increase.
All right, that was going to be my question to
Okay.
you. Mary Beth or Joan, do you have any questions for Scott?
My only question is, I wonder, with this 3% increase, how does that now fall on our new scale for that position?
I believe that puts him mid-range in the, I think he's in the 3. Is he in the 3 or the 4? Again, I don't have that paperwork with me. That's all at my home.
He's in the 4th.
He's in the 4. Okay, so he's, but it puts him mid-range of the range that he's supposed to be in.
Which is appropriate and equal to what the highway superintendent is currently getting.
So Jonathan, you are in support of this?
I'm in support of it for this time, and I'm in support of it for this time because there's no other vehicle for me to, in the middle of a fiscal year, correct what was a mistake to begin with and not giving the cost of living adjustment that we awarded to all non-union personnel last year.
All right. Joan, do you have a question?
This is retroactive to November 11th.
That's what the agenda says.
Mm-hmm.
That was when he was eligible for a merit increase. That's when his review was supposed to have been completed. And the review wasn't completed, not by any fault of, if there were fault to be laid for it being delayed, it would be in the commissioners. But with full remote meetings and everything else, it just made it very difficult to get completed.
Okay.
That's when the review was completed, but when did the other employees start receiving their COLA?
The cost of living adjustment through the chair was given retroactive to those employees who did not get furloughed and remained working through the initial pandemic. Those that were furloughed were retroactive to the date that they returned.
Are there any more questions? So
No, not being a water user, I don't know much about it, but from watching the selectmen's meeting, it seems that George is doing a wonderful job.
So if the board approves of this, then it goes before the Board of Selectmen for approval. Correct, Jonathan?
Correct.
All right, so I'm going to ask for a vote, and it's going to be taken a vocal vote. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Joan?
Do you need a motion or a second?
Oh, I do need a motion. Sorry, I need a motion to move this forward.
We actually have to, just because we're on a Zoom meeting, we have to say, for example, Joan Gaidecki, you have to identify yourself because it's remote. So it's a roll call vote.
So we need a motion to move this forward.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we recommend a 3% merit raise retroactive to November 11th, 2020 for George Petrino's.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second
Superintendent.
that, Mary Beth.
Okay. All those in favor, Joan Gaidecki,
Joan Gaidecki, aye.
Mary Beth,
Mary Beth Marziotti, aye.
Lorna Wade, aye. So that will move forward. Is there any other new business? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business. And that will be Don Jacobs is going to present to us.
So Madam Chair, I spoke to Don and we're looking for, I asked the department heads to join us because as we move forward and continue down the road of parity without, hope somewhat parity with other towns in the area in terms of how we pay people, I wanted to make sure that the department heads were in agreement with the current hourly rates, because they did get adjusted. And I don't think we initially adjusted those
Mhm.
because it happened right in the middle of us doing this salary study. I want to make sure that the department heads are on board with the characteristic charts,
Yep, that's
And-
understood.
so that going forward, there's no conflicts between those two very important items. And
Right,
then we'll take it to the next level.
okay.
So,
Don, you're on.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Let me just make just a couple of quick comments. And obviously, as John just indicated, one of the primary reasons for meeting this morning is really to enable the department heads, and through the department heads, all the other employees, frankly, that are part of this general government study. And I want to just begin by just making a couple of points. What we're primarily talking about this morning, really, again, is a process to pay positions. And listening to you discuss the highway superintendent position. And at the same time, obviously, we understand that there's an employee in the position. But from the get-go, one of our objectives was to make that distinction relative to how to pay a position, and then secondly, how to pay an employee. So the plan that the board has previously reviewed and what we've discussed, and ultimately what has tentatively been approved, is a process to pay positions in accordance with the Massachusetts pay equity law. And I just want to mention that again primarily for the benefit of the board. We've had that equity law sort of sitting off to the side, providing us with guidance to pay positions based on what the law refers to as comparable value or equal pay for equal work. And the process that we've gone through relative to paying a position has been driven primarily by, as you know, what we've established or what we've used as a position rating system that consists of a set of evaluation criteria that John just referred to as the characteristics now that define each grade level. And so the first thing I really want to emphasize primarily for department heads understanding is that when you look at the classification plan, when you look at the grade level plan, those levels, and there are 6 of them that initially have been recommended, have been established by evaluating or comparing positions to one another based on the position rating system, not primarily based on the market data. And I know that's not the way you're used to looking at compensation plans, which is why understanding this process that is different from what the town of Dudley has done in the past is obviously so important. We've used market data. It's not to say that market data or other dollars and cent issues like the rate of pay of an employee, and thirdly, how long an employee is in their current position. But those are characteristics that we've used to define the competitiveness of the salary range that you see. And it was interesting, again, if you followed the discussion that just took place with the personnel board regarding, I believe it was the highway superintendent, and someone made reference to the fact that with this adjustment in rate of pay, that would bring him somewhere close to basically the midpoint of what we've now defined as a competitive rate of pay or a competitive salary range. So defining the word competitive is also new. The town of Dudley has never, and I don't say this disparaging, I say it in the context of this is something new. The town has now defined the word competitive. And you heard it alluded to or mentioned in the previous conversation. And that's the way this process is designed to work. So the town knows whether they're paying a position and then secondly, ultimately an employee, quote unquote, competitively, both internally and externally. That's the plan. That's the process. So the characteristic chart, if you look at it, if you have it in front of you, is really the language you see in there, those bullet points that define each characteristic within for each grade level come right out of the rating system. And if you look at the chart, you'll notice that the most important characteristic that defines each grade level is in bold print. There are other characteristics like a minimum experience, minimum education, supervisory responsibility, and so forth, that define the characteristics for each grade level, but we've just tried to highlight the most important characteristic to try to make it as simple as possible so that everyone understands why a position is at grade level 1, not grade level 2, or 3 versus 4, or whatever the grade level structure is. All of the information that you see on this characteristic chart has now been included in the job descriptions that have been written. So that, and I say this to you as department heads, what's very, very important for this process to work well is for you to understand that the job description, the way it's written today, is the primary, most important characteristic to determine how to pay a position. So that when and if you ever make changes relative to, let's say, what a current employee is required to do in the context or in terms of their level of responsibility, what you should understand is that now there's a process in place to determine whether or not that change, whatever it might be, new job duty, you now are going to be requiring someone to supervise other employees where they never had to before, whatever the change might be. Now there's a process in place before you make the change to determine whether the employee, or first the position and the employee, if there is one in the position, should be paid more money. So that the critical issue from a morale standpoint relative to being paid fairly, being paid consistently, and now the third adjective we're using is paid competitively. There's now a process in place, and ultimately it should be in writing, to explain to everyone how the town does it. So there are no secrets, no surprises, okay? So when and if you ever have questions, whether it's your own position or a position in your department, you now know there's a process which the job description is part of to tell you how the position has been classified, which really means ultimately compensated, okay? Classified means assigned to the grade level. There's a written process now to describe that. So with that, let me just stop. So again, I think any questions, concerns people might have. By the way, let me just also mention, I've given the town as part of this, my final report. I don't know if the personnel board has seen this or not, but I've given you also an appeal form to facilitate the communication aspect of if someone has a concern relative to how they or their position is being paid. There's now a form that I've recommended to the town to adopt or use to facilitate that communication process. All right. So basically, an employee and a department head would fill that form out and submit it to the town administrator, and through the town administrator to, I guess, the personnel board and ultimately the selectmen. So I just wanted to mention that. And I believe, John, Michelle should have that form, which is called an employee appeals form. If you can't find it or what have you, just let me know.
We do have it, and it's my understanding, Don, that that form is intended for, at some point, for example, if say the police chief's admin had all of a sudden had 3 or 4 clerks working under her, that would be time to appeal it, because now she has supervisory responsibility that she maybe wasn't previously classified or put in the correct grade to have that type of responsibility.
Yeah, that's correct. And again, if you ever have a question, and I'm talking about to you as department heads, relative to yourself or a position in your department where you're going to make a change. John just mentioned one type of change. Obviously, that's not the only type of change.
Right.
Every day, employees do things differently. They do new things. You know that, and so do we, which is why facilitating a process to communicate and resolve and make a decision with respect to compensation obviously is so important, okay? And again, very simply, the job descriptions that are now part of the report have been written consistent with how positions have been classified. So the information relative to the characteristics that define each grade level, you'll find in the job description, okay? So that every year, at least once a year, or as necessary, you as department heads should sit down with your employees and minimally just review that job description to make sure that it accurately describes where they're spending most of their time, but also accurately describes the different characteristics that have been applied and used to classify the position: education level, experience level, supervisory responsibility, and so on. There's 13 criteria that you see identified in those job descriptions, and it's really in black and white, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding them. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yeah. You have to unmute yourself.
Have the job descriptions been finalized?
Well, finalized means that the Board of Selectmen has approved the proposed plan. And my understanding is that at the last meeting, John, correct me if I'm wrong, the Selectmen approved the plan that was presented to them.
They approved the characteristic chart, and they approved the compensation
The salary ranges.
salary ranges, correct?
Right. So the answer to your question,
Last I knew, we had been given the job descriptions that you had done and then didn't hear any more of that. Have those been approved, John? Are they working on them?
So what we want to do at this meeting is go department by department. With department heads on the meeting call here, and make sure that, one, the characteristics line up with the position. So you would specifically be speaking to the characteristics inherent to Mary's position, not the job description. We want to confirm what her hourly rate is currently. And once we have those two bits of information, we can go forward with finalizing the job descriptions.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, and again, John, Michelle has an electronic file with all the job descriptions
All right.
in it, so that should be that should move forward.
We're kind of being disciplined on it, very disciplined on this call, because we want to take personalities and people out of it and look only at the characteristics of the job, period. And make sure that we have the correct data in terms of the hourly rate, and then we'll move forward from there.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to know the timeline. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, you may have a concern or question relative to, well, how did we get 6th grade levels, or what do they mean, and so forth. Again, the characteristic chart is just a simple way for you to, as well as your employees, to understand the meaning behind each of the 6th grade levels. And the fact that we came up with 6 grade levels, well, that wasn't a predetermined number. The check and balance, so to speak, relative to developing that grade level structure is your organizational structure. So one of the things we looked at was understanding, if you were to look at an organizational chart of the town of Dudley, who reports to whom in terms of different levels of responsibility. This 6th grade level structure needs to match that organizational structure, whether it's within a department or town-wide, it's both. And again, not primarily determined by market data. So I'd like to, if there are no questions about the characteristic chart, I just want to just talk a little bit about how we've developed the salary ranges, and in doing so, we've presented them to the Personnel Board and the Selectmen with the intent of establishing a competitive salary range structure. I'm talking about the minimum and the maximum. So let me just say a few words about that, just so that you department heads understand the process. So first and foremost, as I think you know, we've surveyed the marketplace on a position by position basis. And all I mean by that is that the process to survey the marketplace is determined by collecting creditable market data on a position by position basis. So all that means, very simply, is that we don't necessarily survey the same communities for all the positions. You may have a position, i.e. the highway superintendent, for example, that when you compare it to the marketplace, there are operational characteristics that determine or define what the highway superintendent in Dudley does today, what the highway superintendent in Dudley's responsibilities are relative to the services that are provided. Same thing applies to the police department, the library department, and so on, that really define who you are relative to the positions in your respective departments, so that we haven't just surveyed the same 10 communities, at whatever the case might be. So we've collected market data, and we've used specifically the survey average midpoint. So we've ruled out the lows and the highs of the market data for the simple reason that the market data is just not that reliable. So we focused on the midpoint of the market data, and then we've grouped the market data, the survey average midpoint, by grade level based on how positions have been classified. And we took that market data, the survey average midpoint, and very simply added it up and averaged it out, so that if we had 4 responses for positions in grade level 1, or 5 in grade level 2, and 6 in grade level 3, whatever the case might be, as long as we had enough market data for each grade level that we were comfortable using, we then use that survey average midpoint that we now call a benchmark. So benchmark means survey average midpoint. It's a market-driven number that we've used to develop a minimum and a maximum linked directly to the market data. Okay? So in doing that, it's our intention, excuse me, to establish a process that allows the town to maintain the salary ranges competitively. So that next year, next fiscal year, or whenever, when you collect new market data, you'll have a process in place to make a decision for each individual grade level, whether they should be adjusted, and I'm talking about the minimum and the maximum, to stay competitive with the marketplace. So that becomes a subjective decision that the town makes every year. What I'm recommending that the town not do, as has been the case in the past, where you've used a percentage across the board to adjust your salary. Well, you haven't had salary ranges, but a lot of towns adjust their whole range structure by the same percentage. That should never happen. If you're going to make a decision each year to adjust your ranges so that they stay as competitive as you want them to be, that should be a specific decision that's made as part of the budget process. So adjusting the ranges, the minimum and the maximum, is made based on new market data. So very simply, by having a process like that, we can describe the salary ranges as being what I call market driven. So that's how the market data has been used. And that's the process that we've recommended that the town establish to maintain the salary ranges. So there may be some years where, based on the new market data, you might adjust the salary range for grade level 5, but not grade level 2. So all the ranges don't have to go up every year. And in point of fact, given the fact that the market data was based on fiscal 20 market data, because that's when we collected the market data, well, we're now in fiscal 21. Obviously, there's new market data out there. The town of Dudley's salary data has been changed, I believe, an across the board 2% increase. So even with that adjustment, the overwhelming majority, I'd say almost 2/3 of your employees in this study, their current rate of pay with the 2% adjustment, those employees are still within that first quadrant. Almost 2/3 of your employees are down in that first quadrant today as we speak, even though the ranges have been developed based on market data that's now a year old, which gets back to why establishing the ranges as wide as we recommended was to make the process easier for the town, so that you don't have to automatically adjust the ranges every year, as you've just done. You haven't adjusted any ranges from what was initially recommended, even though those ranges, again, are based on market data from a year ago. And that's fine. At some point, though, you do want to collect new market data just so that you have current information. So I apologize if I ran on too much. Again, I just wanted to give you an understanding of, once again, the process that we've used to establish the salary ranges based on how positions have been classified. based on those 6 grade levels. Okay. With that, let me stop. And again, if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Why don't we, Don, why don't we go by department, Don, and
Well,
talk
that's
about,
go ahead,
talk
John.
about, talk about how each employee has been graded, placed in a grade level according to what was just recently recommended by the personnel board, accepted by the selectmen, and make sure that those characteristics are appropriate to the job. And everybody is comfortable with that.
Yeah. All right. So let me try to quickly walk you through it. If you look at the first, if you just scroll up to the top, John, just grade level 1 and go to the, yeah, there you go. So as I mentioned earlier, you see the bold, the 2 words that are bolded in each grade level, direct supervision in grade level 1. As it says in the characteristic chart, what that basically means is grade level 1 is an entry level, quote unquote, level of responsibility. So that a position in grade level 1, when you look at the job duties, they're repetitive, routine. Employee pretty much does the same thing all the time. And it doesn't really require a great deal of knowledge and/or skill or experience to carry out those job duty responsibilities, and no regular supervisory responsibility. Grade level 2, so a position like a library aide, in my estimation from writing the draft job descriptions, when you look at those job duties, they're pretty much routine, repetitive, all governed by established rules and regulations. But the key characteristic being they're routine. You follow the same process all the time. Grade level 2, on the other hand, is a broader range of responsibility. You don't necessarily do the same thing as often or as much as you would at grade level 1. There's a wider range of responsibilities, and all of those job duties in a grade level 2 position are governed by established policies, procedures, laws, and/or regulations. Anything unusual, which means not governed by a rule or regulation or law, as it says under the definition of general supervision, the employee checks with their supervisor for direction or guidance. But the employee is expected to know which policy, which procedure to follow for what situation and so forth. Okay? And that's the difference between grade level 1 and grade level 2. Not education level, not experience really. It's really more that level of responsibility that we're trying to describe. You notice both level 1 and level 2, there are no positions that have regular supervisory responsibility in either grade level, but grade level 2 positions, like the accounting assistant, for example, was determined to have a broader range of responsibilities. A lot of the clerical positions. Oh, and by the way, that reminds me to the personnel board, the title clerk, we should look at that again, and we should change it, because when you survey the marketplace, there aren't many positions out there today that are called clerks. My suggestion might be to change that title so that it's more relevant to today's terminology. And then if you move to the 3rd grade level, the 2nd page of the characteristic chart, you see the phrase general direction, and you also see work leader level of supervisory responsibility. Those are the 2 differences between levels 1, 2, and 3. So level 3, an employee, if you look at the positions, like an assistant town clerk or a children's librarian, are positions that we've recommended to be classified at level 3, not 1, not 2. And the reason for being recommending positions to be classified at level 3 is basically a person in grade level 3 could be asked to do anything and everything. And they have to have the knowledge, ability, and skill to determine how to do it without necessarily checking with their supervisor. But in addition to that, there are times when they're asked to give direction and guidance to other employees. So when we use the phrase supervisory responsibility, we're talking about supervision over employees, not the public. Okay, that's a job duty responsibility. So supervisory responsibility means specifically supervision or accountability, as the case might be, or responsibility for overseeing the performance of an employee. Okay, and those are the 2, work leader and general direction, are the 2 characteristics that really determine that next higher grade level, level 3. Level 4, on the other hand, you see the phrase administrative direction and managerial level of supervisory responsibility. Those are department heads. Manager meaning you're accountable not just for yourself but you're also responsible for the performance of the employees and last but not least, the department. Okay, and you have therefore a higher level of supervisory responsibility. Level 5 are what we refer to as major department heads. You see the managerial stated once again, just like it is in grade level 4, but the difference between managerial supervisory responsibility at level 5 is it's more complex. And the word major is defined or is used in several different capacities or characteristics, not just from a supervisory standpoint, but it also has to do with a word that we use in the rating system called accountability. In other words, based on the job duties or the responsibility, the accountability for the performance of a department, you'll see departments at grade level 5 are by definition more complex, 24/7, involving public safety. And that's the reason why the library director position, for example, is recommended to be classified level 4, not level 5, not based on market data, but based on the complexity of the supervisory responsibility, the complexity of the accountability, the nature of the department. Okay. And then last but not least, level 6 is where you have the responsibility that overseeing all the town departments. Obviously, the town administrator position fits into that category. That's the reason why you don't see the police chief position being recommended at grade level 6. It's not that the police chief position or the fire chief or for that matter, the treasurer collector, who are the 3 positions that have been recommended for grade level 5, that's the reason why they're not being recommended to be classified grade level 6. Okay, so that within each of these grade levels, once again, or what I call classification levels, you now have market data applied to each level individually, separate from the other, which gives the town the flexibility to make adjustments in those salary ranges based on market data specific to the positions. Okay, so that's the whole process to determine how to not only pay positions initially, but also how to maintain the competitiveness of this grade level and salary range structure. And that's the whole plan at this point. Now, if I could, and I know I'm running on, maybe we'll have a few minutes. I'd like to just talk a little bit about the next step in the study, which is to determine or develop a process to pay employees, which we haven't done yet. Okay, so, but let me stop there and turn it back to the chairman of the personnel board before she blocks me out.
No, that's not going to happen. I think, Don, rather, Jonathan, are you going to go by departments to see if there have to be any corrections that have been made, or are you going to let just people chime in on that?
I think we should go by department and just see, and as we go through department, we'll determine what grade level the department head's employee has been placed in. For example,
Okay.
grade level 2, and then we'll make sure that it's appropriate, and we'll move on to the next one.
All right, then I would ask you to do that because I don't have a full screen of everybody. So I'll be going back and forth. So if you'd like to lead that, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, so Lisa, we have the assessor clerk. I think we changed the title to assistant assessor, correct? Or that's what we were leaning towards?
She needs to unmute.
You're muted though.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So yeah, so the discussion was she was taking classes to become the assistant. So with the pay range that she has right now, I told her she's only to do the job description of the clerk, which I'm happy with, grade level 2. I think if she, works forward to become an assistant, I think she should be moved up to grade level 3, which I think would be appropriate.
So,
right
okay, so I'm gonna be the devil's advocate because I'm the one who's gonna have to, I'm gonna have to justify this to the selectmen. Regular work leader of supervisory responsibility, who are the employees she would be supervising regularly
on level 3.
on level 3?
Well, I don't think she would be supervising anybody unless you want to get me a third person in here.
Yeah.
It was worth a shot. Well, I guess, so how would that work if she's doing all my responsibilities, well, 3/4 of my responsibilities and not just the clerk work? So how would this pay scale work? Would she stay on a level 3 and be moved up? Or would she jump to a new grade level?
I don't see how we get to a level 3 unless Don can tell me.
Yeah, let me just interject, John, for a second. Just be careful that you're talking about both the employee and the position. So when you talk about the employee taking on more responsibility, again, the position rating process that we've established and the town now has available will help you decide whether that additional responsibility or that new job responsibility is significant enough to move up to grade level 3. It isn't just supervisory responsibility, to answer your question. Let's just, for discussion purposes, let's assume for a minute that, this employee that you're referring to does not take on any supervisory responsibility, but as you were alluding to a minute ago, takes on new, let's call it operational responsibility, administrative responsibility relative to, the services that are provided in the assessing department, that in your opinion are greater than what's described in the job description. So my directive to you is, to answer your question, the first thing you should do is go back and look at the job description. And that job description contains language that describes different levels of responsibility, not just supervisory. Okay? You heard me use the word accountability. You'll see that there's a characteristic on the job description that is called accountable. We use that word and it's in bold print. You can't miss it. Judgment is another characteristic. Complexity of the job responsibilities, which might be something that you may be alluding to. New law comes down, or the department, in order to deal with a new regulation or whatever, or you just simply decide, look, in order for this department to function effectively or properly in compliance, let's say with state law or what have you, I need to change the level of accountability or the level of judgment. Independence is another word that this employee is required to function under, which reflects the fact that she, one, has the ability, but most importantly, the department needs to change the way it's functioning. This is another way of saying you're going to change the organizational structure of the department. So very simply, the easy way to deal with your question is start by going back and looking at the job description. And when you see the appeal form, it's going to require you to do that, because it's going to ask you very specifically, what change in the job description do you think has occurred to warrant, or for the town to consider, paying this employee or position more money? So the job description
level jump.
That's right. So when you start talking about, let's say, as you were doing grade level 2 to grade level 3, when you look at job descriptions in those two different grade levels, you're going to see different language that describes different levels of responsibility. But not to confuse you, you've got to focus on your position. And the simple way to do that is just go back and look at your job description for that.
John raised a good question. So she wouldn't have any supervisory responsibilities because there's nobody else that she works with besides me. But if she takes on, if she can run the office and do my job, for example, going out and measuring, listing new homes,
Right.
building them in the computer, adjusting values, that is not in the clerical position.
Or let me just give you another example, because I'm familiar with assessing departments, or on your behalf testifies,
Correct.
right? Tax court or whatever, right?
Right.
Those are all good examples that when you go back and look at the current job description that's been written, that's consistent with grade level 2. Remember, by saying that, I'm telling you it's not consistent with grade level 3. There are different characteristics that define grade level 3 of responsibility, which is why the simple way for you to understand, based on a change that you want to make as the manager of your department, as it relates specifically to an employee in your department, it doesn't take just supervisory responsibility that might justify the town paying her position more money. But again, if you're just talking about how she currently carries out her job duties, which is another way of separating the position from the employee. Now, is it something she already does today, let's say, and let's assume just for discussion, she now does it better, more effectively. She still has the same responsibility, but she's just doing it better.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Because
Yeah, sure.
Again, I think it's my role here to be devil's advocate, because I'll be the one sitting with the Board of Selectmen. I don't think there's a single person on this call that thinks for 1 second that when you look at grade level 3 and you get the regular work leader, there's any chance that the Board of Selectmen approves it. There's no, that will be an immediate disqualifier. So if we justify that she's going to run the next lunar landing, it's not going to matter if it says she's a regular work leader. We won't be able to get past that. Realistic.
So I guess my question is, so John, she was already working on this, because years ago, an assessor's office could run with just a clerk. And I don't mean just a clerk in a bad way. I'm saying, administrative duties. Today, you have an office that has sometimes 3 people, somebody that goes out and just does the 400 building permits, somebody that's in here doing clerical position, and then the assessor. So my question is if we can keep this up and run more efficiently, and she goes to school and she takes these classes, and she becomes a designated assessor, but working as my assistant. So if I was out for a month or 2 months, she could do everything that I'm doing. Would that qualify her to go up to a grade level 3, being an assistant to me? So basically, she'd be doing my duties when needed.
I think for me, what it boils down to is being able to justify it. And if you were not there, if she's not regularly required to do, whether she has the training or not, whether she's regularly required to do grade level 3 functions, if that position is regularly required to do that, sure, but I don't see how we pay someone to provide that function who doesn't regularly have to do that function. There are sergeants in the police department that may have the level of education and experience to be police chief, but we don't pay those sergeants as police chiefs because they're not regularly required to be a police chief.
So this would go under the above and beyond responsibilities when we do the evaluation, that she went above and beyond by taking classes, going out and doing some building permits. It's not in her job description, but I could put in there, hey, can she get a merit raise for going above and beyond? Is that what you're kind of saying? But not grade level?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and this, let me just jump in 1 second, John, because I think it's a great conversation. And I just don't know the name of your assessor. I refer to by name.
Lisa.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What you heard John say, basically, the way I interpreted what John just said was the difference between the town requiring someone to do something versus you as a department head wanting them to assume. So the initiative for the change and responsibility typically starts with the department head, yourself as the assessor. And what you just described was a typical scenario where you as department head, in order for your department to function more effectively, really need someone to take on more responsibility to fill in when you're not there, and to take on complete responsibility when you're not there. Not just to keep the door open, not just to answer the phone, but to take on responsibility to make decisions relative to the assessing department. The question, and what you heard, what you saw John respond to was, well, does the town agree with you that that's a change in responsibility that the town wants to pay for? Okay. So it's your responsibility as department head to advocate for your department, to advocate for yourself, right? What you think is the best way to do something, but it's the town's responsibility to decide whether they want it, whether they want to do it or not, whether they want to require that change in responsibility. which they know by making that decision is going to cost them more money. Okay. And that's by making that decision, not based on money, but based on different levels of responsibility, it allows the process to function much, much more effectively. In other words, it's not dollars and cent driven. You have to sell as a department head. And I can't emphasize this enough to you as department heads. The mistake I find department heads make all the time, okay, is that you walk in the door and you argue dollars and cents. When the first thing you should be discussing or arguing, so to speak, I say argue, you should be presenting the reasons why you want to make a change is to benefit the town, not just the employee. You want to be fair to the employee, but this process is designed to enable the town to make decisions as to how much money it wants to spend. Okay. And in this case, we're talking about spending money to reflect additional responsibility. All I'm suggesting is that that conversation that you were just having needs to happen before the employee takes on more responsibility, not afterwards. Because you know and I know that's one of the common, most common things that happen all the time, where you've asked me to take on more and more responsibility, some of which I've wanted to do, let's say, but now you're not paying me more money. And you know and I know I reach a point where I think you're taking advantage of me.
That's exactly what happened.
And that's what we want to avoid. And the responsibility to avoid that, with all due respect, is on your shoulders, not the town's. This is a bottom-up driven process, okay? It starts with you as a department head, and then you represent the employee. That doesn't mean the employee doesn't have the right, particularly as a non-union employee, to go directly to the town, meaning to the town administrator. We all understand that, you know, they have that right. But you and I both know if an employee exercises that right, doesn't mean that's the way the town's going to respond. The first question they're going to ask the employee is, well, have you talked to your department head? All right. So it's going to come back to you one way or the other as a manager of your department. So it's absolutely essential. And I haven't had a chance to meet with you and to talk to you as managers. This now has become part of your responsibility. It's not the town administrator's responsibility to recognize when one of your employees in a department is going to take on more responsibility. You and I, we all know the town administrator probably doesn't have anything to do with it, right? He's not the one who's, or she, as the case may be, is not initiating that change. You're the initiator. So it's your responsibility to initiate that conversation as early on as you possibly can. Don't wait until the employee has gone to class, has gotten certified. You want to know, look, if we do this, as I think you were just asking John, you know, what's your response going to be? Okay, so you can have that conversation at any time. Don't wait until after it's already done. Police chief wants to reorganize the police department and create a deputy police chief position. Done all the time, where it's not unusual. Before that deputy position gets created, I would hope the chief would have a conversation with the town as to a change in managing the department and why it's so important. It's my way of saying that's a good way for you as department head to take the approach of saying, look, here's the win for the town. Here's what you're going to gain if my employee takes on more responsibility. So it isn't just the employee gaining, in this case, learning how to do something, but also getting paid more money. There's got to be a win for the town in it. If not, it's a much, much, much harder sell. You're not going to be successful in advocating for more money. And I think you understand, I think you see that.
I got it now.
So when it's all said and done, it really helps you. Hopefully you realize that. What I'm saying is not to hurt you, but I am being very specific and saying you now have this responsibility. It's up to you to decide whether you want to exercise it or not. It's not the town's responsibility. Okay. I'm just trying to get back to that hierarchy. That's a great point. I'm glad you raised it.
So are we comfortable with a grade 2 for now, Lisa, or proceeding forward based
Yes,
on
I'm
that?
sorry, John. After all that, I am very happy with the grade 2.
Well, no, you ended up being the test case, didn't you?
Yeah, we're gonna beat you up.
I didn't mean to drag this out. My answer was supposed to be quick, but I want to be knowledgeable too. So
Well, that's right. There you go. The answer isn't always quick. It's, do you understand it? That's the key.
So Don, why don't we move on to,
Yeah.
let's move on.
Jonathan,
Yes,
Scott Sikowski. I know I wasn't specifically asked to be in this part of the meeting. However, I've got a meeting in about 5 minutes with our tie and bond engineer. but I know that our administrative assistant position, I believe, is right now placed in the grade level 2. I believe that even as stated in the job description, revised on January of 2019, it works under the general direction of the superintendent, and most duties are performed independently and require knowledge of department operations, sound decision-making, and initiative. I believe that belongs in the grade level 3 level. I mean, I can.
What position are we talking about? Is it admin assistant?
The water sewer administrative assistant, yes.
Yeah, is in grade level 3.
It is in grade level 3.
Correct.
Okay, I had heard that it was in, originally in 1, and then it was pushed up to 2.
Oh, you heard a rumor, huh?
Okay.
You got to deal with the facts.
Yeah, I haven't been in any of these meetings, so I
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Scott. I didn't mean to make light of it. No, in all seriousness, that's a great question, and that's exactly the issue we want to resolve. No, the position right now has been classified at grade level 3 for the reason you just said.
That's where I believe it belongs.
You did a good job.
Can we get a copy of those? Because I have an old copy showing that she's in grade level 2. So maybe
Yeah.
I don't have an updated list.
Yeah, I don't think you do.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's step out then and go to my other meeting.
We're gonna have to have a further conversation, I think, when this is all settled on. So
Mhm.
let's go to the police chief. He's got 1 assistant. And I think we have,
Yeah, I don't know, is that position classified right now in grade level 2? Because I guess my question was gonna be almost similar probably to Lisa's, where and she'd probably be in level 2, but also does some of the duties in level 3. And so I don't know where it's all classified at this point.
we have her classified in grade level 2 right now.
Okay. So if there was any other things, I guess it'd probably go in the same vein of if there's other things, like, for example, she oversees, really trains and schedules and oversees the interns in the department right now. So more or less a supervisory role or something that's kind of been taken on. So if there's additional duties and things like that, that's something I believe that you're talking about. You'd make the case for either some type of either a merit or some other type of adjustment somewhere along the way, if that's what I can gather from the Lisa Berg getting beaten up conversation.
Are we comfortable with a grade 2 for now until we can determine how regular those duties are and so forth?
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Okay. That was easy.
Please, somebody make it hard so I don't look so bad.
You don't look bad. You just bought a lot of goodwill with your employee.
Somebody always has to get beaten up first. That's what makes it better for everybody else.
I don't see any blood.
Not yet.
Well, that having been said, let's move on to Rich. Rich, it looks like we have the assistant treasurer collector classified in the 3. And I believe the premise of that is that he or she regularly oversees the work, does some of the responsibilities of the treasurer collector and oversees the daily workflow of the treasurer collector clerk. Is that how we describe it?
Yes.
That's 100% correct. Sorry, Lisa, no static. And then grade 2 falls in with the clerk admin. I like Don's statement that, there's a better term to describe that position. But that's exactly what is there. It's grade 2. I'm looking at, I'm thinking it's an earlier version where that position's not even listed under grade level 2, but right now you're confirming it is.
You're talking about the assistant treasurer collector?
Nope, the assistant was on the original version of this, grade level 3. It would be the clerk, the admin position, and the treasurer.
Oh,
collector.
yeah, it's at level 2, correct.
Yep, okay.
Okay, so you're comfortable with that for now?
I'm comfortable, absolutely.
Okay. Let's move on to the town clerk's office then, if you're all set, Rich.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify where Jackie is right now. Is she in a grade 3?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I lost my connection for a little bit earlier, so if you already answered this, we're just going with the descriptions of the grade level and where our positions are right now, right? Not the dollar amount for the employee?
Correct.
Okay, I'm good with it.
I ask a question? John?
Mhm.
So does Jackie have, where you were questioning, supervisory responsibilities?
She does, because she has all of the Board of Health assistants and during all of the elections, the election workers.
Okay, thank you.
So Jackie's a unique position because I think that if we move on to, I'm sorry, you're all set, Laurie, with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So I think if we move on to the town accountant, that she fits into a 1 or a 2 for the town accountant. I think Deb, you requested a 2, thought that was more appropriate for what she does to help
Right.
your office.
Yeah, did she get moved? Because I don't have an updated sheet.
Yes, she's at
In the original
grade level
sheet,
2.
she was-
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And that's all I have. If she's level 2, I'm fine with that. I just had a question about my line item on your spreadsheet. You had me at being here 7 years. I've been here a little over 17. So I just didn't know if you changed that.
Yeah, Michelle's in the process of going through that to make sure we get that right.
Oh, okay.
I
We'll
apologize for that.
make sure that we'll make sure that we have those correct, and the actual hourly rates are exactly what we're currently paying the employees, so there's no discrepancy there. But Don, I wanted to ask Don this question. When you have an employee that does those 2 different split positions, those 2 different functions, classified out of grade for 1 or for 2 of them, depending on how you look at it, how do you pay that employee?
Well, assuming that, again, first, it always goes back to the job description, John. Assuming that the job description has been written to include both areas of responsibility in terms of the essential functions, then again, that's important from the standpoint of how you pay the position. In other words, it's another way of saying, in writing the job description to include those 2 different areas of responsibility, we're only going to pay one position that requires the employee in the position to have the knowledge, ability, and skill to work in both areas, whatever that might be, okay? And then relative to let's say the complexity aspect of it, or some other characteristic that relates to either area of responsibility, now you're talking about and how well the employee performs in that capacity. Now you're talking about the employee, not the position, okay? And that's the way to deal with it, is to try to make that distinction between what the employee does and, let's say, how well he or she does in carrying out those responsibilities in comparison to what the position requires. Okay.
It's hard for me to understand that concept because to me, it's like you have I don't know, a head chef slash dishwasher. It's like, it's two different skill sets.
Well,
And
let's use that as,
present
let's use
the
that as an
head-
example, John. Clearly, a head chef and a dishwasher are at two different levels of responsibility, correct?
Correct.
So the rule of thumb is you can always work below your highest level of responsibility. That head chef can do dishwashing work as necessary, and you don't have to pay him more money because they're taking on responsibility that's lower, less than, requires less knowledge, less skill, less ability than being a head chef.
So how do you remedy the idea that you're paying too much money for a position?
Well,
If it's
first
a
of all, there's no such thing as
grade
too much.
If it's a grade two, if it's a grade 2 versus a grade 3,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, let's say you have a
I
position
don't
today.
think it's gonna be a ridiculously different amount of money.
Well, the first question is not a money question, John. Let's use the town clerk as an example, okay? I can think of one off the top of my head. So you take that election function that's part of the town clerk operation, and let's say the town decides, for whatever the reasons, and we're talking hypothetically here, right? To create a separate election function, separate and distinct from the other primary function in the town clerk's office, and that's to maintain public records, right?
Mhm.
And in order to really run your elections differently, let's say there's new laws, new rules, whatever the case might be, it really requires somebody to devote full time, which up until now has been a part-time responsibility. So as town clerk, I've been able to oversee the elections and the public records responsibilities. But now all of a sudden, there's a whole new kind of election system, brand new technology, whatever the heck it is. And you've got to create a new department, or it's still a function within the town clerk's department, but it requires somebody to devote full time to it, not part-time. And you'll know that based on the responsibilities, once again, the way the job description is written. So if there aren't those kind of changes that warrant, let's say, the employee spending more time than they've been spending on, you heard the town clerk say earlier that during elections, the assistant provides direction guidance to the election workers, right? But let's say, you double the number of precincts, voting precincts, and not just giving direction and guidance, but you're going to require that employee to take disciplinary action because the election system's just gotten a lot bigger, more people, and it's quantifiable, right? So it's not a surprise, it's measurable. The town still has to decide whether they want to pay somebody to take on that, let's call it supervisory responsibility, to hold people accountable. Because up until now, she's only had to give direction and guidance. She's never had to take disciplinary action. But now, because of whatever operational changes have occurred, so the point is there's a process, John, to allow that type of issue to work its way through the system, meaning up through you to the selectmen and back down again in a timely way so that the employee's treated fairly. Okay, so it gets back to the job description today. Right now, that job description says you work in both the election area and you work in the public records area. And here are the things you do. And here's the level of responsibility. It's all spelled out. So if the clerk wants to change that, which obviously, that's her prerogative, in a timely manner, all I'm saying is the department head, once again, has to come to you to enable you then to obviously bring it to the personnel board and the selectmen, so the decision gets made in a timely manner relative to compensation. Okay.
So this is probably, and we're almost done, and I appreciate everybody hanging in there, but what do you do when that position now becomes a full-time assistant town accountant? Clearly classified as a 2, and that person appeals that the previous employee was being paid as a 3.
Well, again, I would hope the department head would be taking the initiative on something like that, so that you're hearing directly from the manager of the department how he or she wants to change the way the department functions. Now, the employee can initiate it as well, and don't misunderstand me, but it's going to come back to the department head. That doesn't mean you have to agree with the department head, because the employee may make a valid argument that, in fact, he or she should be paid more money. But again, it's all about following the process. And I think that, you know, the treasurer collector, not to pick on the treasurer collector, but, you know, we've talked a little bit about how that title is kind of misleading relative to the position, and meaning the responsibilities in Dudley. There are other treasurer collectors that don't have the same broad range of responsibility that your treasurer collector has. And sometimes titles, you know, can be a little bit misleading, but the title is a title. But the fact is, it still boils down to the job description. And the good news is, John, you're starting out with a set of job descriptions today that match this proposed plan. So that going forward, everybody's at the same starting point. And therefore, if any changes occur, you know, everybody knows what they are. Okay.
I think we've, have we missed anybody?
If I could just say one last thing, John, again, I think, you know, this conversation that we're just having right now is a good reason why I can't encourage you enough to move this process forward to address the employee side of things, because that's ultimately what they're more concerned about. I'm not trying to argue for employees, but the fact is that, you know, as the worksheet chart that I've given you, John, indicates, there are a lot of employees today that have been there quite a while that are down in that first quadrant of these proposed ranges. And I say this to the personnel board. I can't encourage you enough to look at that and make decisions as to what you want to do about it, if anything. Okay. Which gets back to, again, defining the word competitive. But even more basic than that, I guess the last thing I just want to say is that for the department heads anyway, what I've outlined basically with John at this point, there are lots of ways to pay employees more money, not just the way you've been doing it. And what I look forward to having with you is a conversation about what some of those ways are. And you may have some ideas that, you know, frankly, I don't know about. So the next step really is to have that conversation and to talk about, you know, ways to pay employees more money, and just as you've seen done with regard to paying a position, develop a process that you're comfortable with as it affects you personally, but also obviously how it's going to affect your employees that are general government employees. That's you know, I don't know what else. I just think it's important for us to move on to that next step. And I'm saying this to the personnel board, and not to let too much more time go by. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, a lot of time has gone by, and that always concerns me. It's sort of like, you know, having done so many of these studies, time becomes an issue that we really need to recognize and deal with. And in this case, you know, you're already starting planning for your next fiscal year, to say the least. And the piece that we haven't addressed is the employee part, which ultimately becomes very, very important, obviously.
Okay, I think, Madam Chair, if everybody on the call, all the department heads are currently comfortable.
Appears to me that whatever issues that the managers have had, they have raised them, and that there seems to be agreement where people in the departments have been placed. Is that correct, Jonathan? Am I reading that correctly?
I think we're on the same wavelength, but we have a mechanism to address anything that, you know, may come up. So I think we have to go.
I guess, Don, what are you looking for from the Personnel Committee? I mean, we've moved this to the Board of Selectmen, the two issues that the classification and the pay range, which they have agreed and have adopted. And so where do you see the Personnel Board going next with this?
Well, at this point, the next step is working through the town administrator and your department heads to develop this, what I simply refer to as the employee compensation plan. So that all I'm suggesting is that I have an opportunity to meet with, talk to your department heads And the outcome of that step in the process would be a draft employee compensation plan that, once again, through the town administrator, we would bring back to the personnel board.
Okay. Mary Beth, you said that you have to leave. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't have any questions. I just, I do have to be somewhere in a little bit, so I just
Okay.
wanted to, if we need to do a vote on something, I just wanted to make sure that you knew.
I don't think we need to do a vote. Do you, John?
No, I'm comfortable. I just want everybody to be on the same page and, you know, have an idea as to what the next steps will be. It's not looking as though, I don't want to raise anybody's hopes falsely, but it does not look like we're going to be immediately doing anything about pay on June 30th. We may look closer to October, but as it stands right now, my whole goal here is to try to correct things that I didn't previously have anything to do with. So I hope everybody just kind of bears with me and bears with the personnel board when we talk about this publicly and try to correct some of these challenges that we have in front of us, and understand that it's not going to be perfect right out of the chute. There's going to be some changes that, you know, are not going to be immediate, but we're certainly making steps now, I think, towards addressing it.
Joan, do you have
Madam
any?
Chair,
Yes, I was going to ask you if you have a comment.
I need an updated salary survey because I don't even have the collector clerk on mine. And I have the administrative assistant for water and sewer in grade level 2, which he said it was 3. And the assistant town clerk is in 2, which he said it was 3.
I
Correct.
have the same thing. John, can we all get emailed an updated, corrected list of that?
I'll send out an updated list based on this meeting.
And I also asked Michelle if she would send the board a copy of the appeal process.
The appeal form, yep. And
Right,
I'm gonna-
because we have not seen that. So that Jonathan has really, I appreciate that he's come in and he's really worked very hard. And it worked us more than I think that we've been worked before with this. And so I think that we are up to the task ahead to continue working and try to go through this process to make this equitable. I appreciate everything that Dawn has done to explain the philosophy to us, because to me, the philosophy of how we determine where we place people in their classifications and how he came about with the salary ranges, I think makes sense. And I think he spent a great deal of time explaining it to the personnel board. And I hope that I think the direction we're looking now is working further with Jonathan, correct, Don, in going through this process?
That's correct, Madam Chairman. And
And
again,
you're right. It has taken a long time, and we do want to move this as expeditiously as possible. Because expeditiously doesn't necessarily mean speed. It means efficiency and done well, in my estimation.
Yeah, and again, Madam Chair, just add one more point, and that is that developing a process doesn't cost you any money. Okay, and I know, John, it's only natural the town would be concerned about money, obviously. But the fact of the matter is, I keep, as you've heard me say repeatedly, emphasizing developing a process and how critical that is. Right now, the process you're using to pay employees, in my personal opinion, is not equitable. It's not fair. This 2% across the board business just isn't a very effective way to do it. It's kind of like the lazy man's way of doing it. We give everybody a 2% increase and we live to fight another day. Well, that's not the most effective way to manage compensation, in my opinion. But I can't emphasize enough. The next step of the process, I want to be crystal clear with the personnel board, is when I say I want to meet with your department heads, what I'm trying to do is then function as a facilitator I want you to know what they're thinking with regard to how they want to be paid. Okay. And believe me, we will present that to you. And in doing so, again, develop a process that everyone's comfortable with. All I'm saying is that, like I said at the beginning of the study, don't be surprised if there's some recommended changes. Just be open-minded enough to recognize that there are lots of ways to pay people. And you've heard some of the issues this morning relative to the employee aspect of this. It's very difficult to separate the employee from the position, to say the least. It's one and the same thing in a lot of ways, which is why I keep saying, you know, I've had several conversations with John over the last month or so about how critically important it is to get back on task relative to the employee aspect of this. Now that you and the selectmen are on board with regard to being comfortable with the process we've used, now we've got to develop a process that you're just as comfortable with regard to paying the employee.
I agree.
Okay.
And I think there's a huge difference between equality and equity. And we're looking for equity in this process. I think one of the things for department heads also that you mentioned, I think moving forward, if you can present to the personnel board and then to the Board of Selectmen, how, if you want to move somebody on to a higher level, that to present what benefit that is to the town.
Right.
Because oftentimes, like with Lisa, oftentimes how efficiently your office runs not only benefits you, more importantly, it benefits the town. Because you can get through paperwork more efficiently, and that benefits the members of the citizenry in the town. So I think if we move that way, and if department heads move that way when they want to do something of that sort, that will be beneficial. And if we're on that page, that would be helpful.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, in your first conversation this morning with regard to the highway superintendent, what I heard was statements about benefit to the town. You heard some of those, right? They just weren't very clear. And it wasn't as specific, and it certainly wasn't measurable, right? And what you're going to see with the new process is that whatever way you decide ultimately to pay employees more money needs to meet three basic criteria. Needs to be, and they're very simple, but there needs to be specific enough so you all understand it. Everyone understands it, no matter what side of the table you're on. Needs to be measurable, and it needs to be time bound. What you heard this morning, if you think back to that conversation you had with your highway superintendent, I think it was specific enough that I understood what he was talking about, but in no way was it measurable, and in no way was it time bound. It was open-ended.
Explain further what you mean by time bound.
I know when it's done or not done. I mean, I know what day it was done. I know when it was done. I know how it was done. And you don't know any of that listening to that conversation. The form you're using right now for performance management is a pretty standard form that just isn't detailed enough, as you're going to see in the process that we're going to recommend, so that you better understand, you feel more comfortable understanding not only, by the way, how to pay a current employee, but the other issue that we need to address is how to hire new employees, which we haven't even talked about, right? No. And we will talk about both of those, you know, how to hire a new employee, but then also how to retain your current employees. And once again, it all gets back to maintaining those ranges. One of the decisions you're going to need to make is, do you want to allow employees to reach the maximum of those ranges? Yes or no? Okay. I never recommend ideally allowing employees to max out. I just don't understand why you'd want to do that, but you might decide that's okay. There are lots of places that do allow people to reach the top of their ranges within a defined period of time. I just don't think that's flexible enough, but that's just my opinion. But those are the kind of issues that we're going to talk about next. How to hire a new employee and how to retain your current employees.
Right. Jonathan, he's muted. I don't know if he's still there, but I don't think there's anything further. We don't need to take a vote on anything. Oh, he's back on. So Jonathan, we don't need to make a motion on anything. We just need to work with you to move this process further, correct?
Correct. This entire exercise was just about making sure that department heads were comfortable with where their employees were placed and graded.
Okay, so as the chairman of the Personnel Board, I'd like to thank all of the department heads for giving their time this morning and giving their input to the process so that we can develop with Jonathan and with Dawn, a process by which we hire people, we place them on a scale, and we pay them in an equitable manner. So thank you for your time. And
Thank
you want
you.
to say something?
I
Rich?
did, not
Okay.
not to extend the meeting anymore, but Donna is now working.
Hello.
Yay.
Hi, Donna, welcome.
Welcome, Donna.
Thank you.
My quick introduction, I'm introducing a band that everybody's got a mask on because we're in the same office. But I wanted to make sure, you'll never see Joan, you know, she's our ghost. But at one point, we'll make sure that everybody says hello. Some of these people are in the building, some of them are calling from home. Don Jacobs has been around for a good long while as a consultant. Don, the next time you're here, we'll even introduce you.
All right.
Donna Headley Wires, off to a great start on a beautiful sunny morning. She's going to be the direct benefit of everything that we've discussed here today. So thank you for a few minutes to speak. Have a good day.
Thank you. All right, so if there are no other, Dawn, did you want to say something else? Was your hand up?
No.
Okay. If there are no other, if there is nothing else that we wish to discuss, I'm going to call and ask, well, there's only Joan and myself that's left. I'll call for Joan to make a motion for an adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right. So Joan, are you in favor?
Yes.
I say aye. Our next meeting, Michelle, maybe you can, have we moved our meetings to the second Tuesday of the month, or are we still on the third Tuesday of the month? Or did we adjust this for Dawn's schedule?
No, I'd be happy to do whatever you want me to do. So say the third Tuesday of the month?
It was the third Tuesday of the month. It makes
Okay.
no difference. So that would be the 20th of April. That will be our next meeting.
Good.
And we'll work around the time. If Don is going to be presenting to us again, or if he's going to be working with us, we'll work with his schedule, or whatever works for Jonathan. All right.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank
All
you,
right.
everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
night. Have a good day.
Bye.